this morning comes from 1 Peter, Peter's first letter, the 4th chapter, reading verses 4 through 7. Let's listen again for the word of the Lord. Verse 7 through 11. The end of all things is near. Therefore, be serious and discipline yourselves for the sake of your prayers. Above all, maintain constant love for one another, for love covers a multitude of sins. Be hospitable to one another without complaining. Like good stewards of the manifold grace of God, serve one another with whatever gift each of you has received. Whoever speaks must do so as one speaking the very words of God. Whoever serves must do so with the strength that God supplies, so that God may be glorified in all things through Jesus Christ. To him belong the glory and the power forever and ever. Amen. Please pray. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. If you had the opportunity to build a church, from scratch, what sort of church would you build? What would it look like? What would it be like? Maybe it'd be like this, a lovely Mediterranean revival, Spanish Mediterranean revival kind of building, a beautiful sanctuary that has been a gift to this congregation since the mid-late 1920s. Or maybe it would be a wood frame, clapboard kind of structure, a little chapel in the wildwood. Or maybe it would be a soaring Gothic cathedral. What kind of church would you build? I will tell you, I have worshiped in all sorts of different churches all over the world. I've worshipped in big, soaring European cathedrals. I have worshipped in one of the oldest cathedrals. Actually, not worshipped, but been in one of the oldest cathedrals, Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, now a museum rather than a place of worship. But I've also worshipped in concrete buildings in the middle of the Caribbean where the jealousy windows and the ceiling fans tried to take advantage or create as much of a little breeze as they possibly could through the stifling heat. I've actually been in, maybe you have too, a beautiful log cabin sort of Episcopal church. Probably seats no more than about 50. And yet its back window behind the pulpit opens up to the soaring Teton Mountains of Wyoming. It's a beautiful, beautiful little chapel. I have worshipped in European cathedrals where the venom and vigor of the early church reformers stripped the place of every single thing that could possibly smack of art, lest we get into idolatry or be distracted from the preaching of the word. And I have worshipped in congregations and churches that were nothing more than a little bit of palm branches covering up a bamboo frame, just trying to beat off the West African heat and sun. And I will tell you that none of these churches were any more likely to evoke the Spirit of God than another. Perhaps they all had their own different strengths and possibilities, but each one could bear, each one could hold the awesome and amazing and mysterious and yet intimate presence of God. A couple of weeks ago, I talked about the new church that I started over in Tampa a number of years ago, and about how we started off without a church building as such. We worshipped in a middle school cafeteria. The cafeteria itself probably sat about 500-600 kids. It was a huge, huge space. And our congregation wasn't that big, so we actually connected with one of those folks that make displays for trade shows. And we bought all sorts of poles and drapes so that we could try to create a little bit more sacred space amidst all the grimy lunch tables and gum stuck up underneath the flies that would swarm around. Just trying to create a little bit more of a worshipful space. And we would take all those drapes, and we would take all those poles, and we were fortunate enough as a new church that the school actually gave us a little closet where we could shove all these things and store them. But I knew plenty of other people, starting plenty of other churches, that didn't even have that luxury. Instead, they would buy an old beat-up used U-Haul trailer and shove all those instruments and items that they needed for worship every day, every Sunday. So they would haul them in and haul them out just to create church for a few hours on a Sunday morning. Well, I will admit, having had that experience of church in a box, of hauling church in and hauling church out every Sunday, I have a little bit of sympathy for what Moses and the people of Israel were talking about in the 35th chapter of Exodus that was just read. In it, Moses is trying to encourage the people and collect their energies and their efforts and their resources to build a tabernacle for God. A tent, really. For they, Moses and the Israelites, were still wandering around in the wilderness, going from place to place, walking in circles much of the time for nearly 40 years. And yet during that time, they would have a place of worship. A temple, but a temple on wheels, perhaps, that could be set up and taken down as they moved from place to place. It would be a mobile place, but it would also be God's place. The place where God would literally reside. And evidently from the description that Lauren just read in the 35th chapter, this was no regular ordinary camping tent. This was quite an elaborate sort of tent. Decked out with all sorts of fine linen and fine cloth and gold and jewels. I can't imagine shoving all that in the back of a used U-Haul. And yet, this tent of meeting, this tabernacle to the Lord, filled with the best that the people had amongst themselves, providing an inspiring, certainly awe-inspiring place, even for a mobile tent like that. Now, perhaps you're a little bit of a scholar of the book of Exodus, and Moses is calling the people to take their best, their jewelry, their gold, their jewels, and to give it to a thing of worship. That might ring a bell to you, because they had done that before. You may remember that while Moses was up on the mountain talking to God, Aaron and the rest of the Israelites had gotten a little bit impatient, shifting, a little anxious and uneasy in their seats. How long is Moses going to be up there talking to God? Is he still around? Is he even still alive? In their anxiety, Aaron decided to gather all of their jewels, all their jewelry, all their best gold and gemstones, and to shape it into a golden calf, so that they could dance and worship around it. Turn to it for security. Turn to this inanimate object for some sense of divine inspiration. And yet, even with this wayward act, even with this diversion that certainly spoke more of their anxiety than it did of anything holy and divine, God still did not let that stop God from giving God's presence to God's people. For here's a place of worship. Here is a tabernacle. Here is, for them, literally the dwelling place of God. Surely God is filling the cosmos, but God is also filling that tabernacle, that place where they could find God's presence in their lives. Later on, King David, once they got settled into the promised land, and David made Jerusalem his capital, David went to God and said, God, I've got a deal for you. I'm going to make you a permanent place. And God's response to the great King David was, who do you think you are? I'm fine with the tent. And yet that tent or that temple, the place of God's dwelling. One of the interesting things that I noticed this week in looking at that text in Exodus, though, was in its description of the tabernacle, this tent of meeting, so resplendently constructed. It does not give a description of its completion. It does not talk about the way that the tabernacle, the tent actually was. It does not send you on some sort of guided tour of the completed tent or structure. No, the writer of Exodus tells us about the process, tells us about the construction, tells us about the generosity of the people that made it possible. That somehow the dwelling place of God was more about community gathering, more about the community giving, more about the process of completion than it was about the finished product itself. God was alive in the action. In the action. Fast forward quite a number of centuries and you pick up 1 Peter. Peter was, or whoever wrote 1 Peter, maybe folks writing on Peter's behalf, was writing to a group of Christians, early Christians, who knew what it was like to be the odd people out. As Gentiles and Jews converted to this new Christian faith, they often found themselves at odds with their neighbors. And in fact, scholars tell us that among the early Christians, especially in the Roman Empire, there were all sorts of nasty rumors going around. There were rumors, you may know, that they actually were cannibals because they ate the body and the blood. There were rumors going around that Christians actually practiced incest because all that talk about loving your brother and sister. There certainly were accusations about the early Christians that they were in fact atheists because they didn't worship the pantheon of gods. Rumors going around that Christians in fact were unpatriotic because they would not say that Caesar was God. All sorts of nasty rumors going around, all sorts of opposition and pushing back against the early Christian community. And so those early Christians often found themselves isolated and alone. And to them, though, to these early Christians struggling in a strange and odd culture, a culture that they were often at odds with, Peter writes some of my favorite words in all of Scripture, telling these Christians, you are a chosen race. You are a royal priesthood. For people at odds with the rest of their culture, Peter writes, you are a holy nation. You are God's own people in order that you may proclaim the mighty acts of Him who called you out of darkness into His marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you're God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Peter is reminding those early Christians that as much as they may feel at odds with the culture around them, as much as they have been rejected or pushed against by their neighbors and other residents of their cities and towns and communities, that they were their own people. They had been brought together by God. They were God's people. They were, in fact, somebody. Even though the rest of the world, they had told them they were nobody. So Peter imagines, First Peter imagines, what this early Christian community did, what this new church that God was building, what it would be like. In the 4th chapter that we just read, First Peter talks about the building blocks of things like prayer and love and radical hospitality and service. They weren't building a literal structure. In fact, church buildings would not be constructed specifically for the purpose of worship for another couple of centuries after 1 Peter was written. building church nonetheless. A new people, a holy nation, God's own people. And it would be a church marked with these building blocks of prayer and love and hospitality and service. So I ask you, what kind of church would you build? Or better yet, what kind of church are you building? Or better even yet, what kind of church are we building? You and I. Because just like Moses and the people of Israel, it's not about a completed project. It's not about a beautiful space that we were given in 1926 like this. It's about what we are doing today, in this moment, in our actions, in our collective ministry and mission together, the community that we are building collectively. As 1 Peter so clearly points out, it is the church that we are building, you and I, together. It stands as a witness. It stands as a witness to the rest of the world, because just as God's presence was found in that tabernacle, the New Testament declares that you and I are building the body of Christ. You and I are building Christ's presence in this world. With prayer, love, hospitality, and service, justice, compassion, generosity, all these things. The kind of church that you and I are called to build. So yes, this is the Sunday that we come down and talk about those things. And each of us has been invited, particularly these past weeks, to be in prayer about that. Remembering, of course, that 35th chapter of Exodus, while Moses called people to use their best, to give the best of what they had, to help together collectively as a community build the presence of God in their midst and in their community. So that's the gift that you and I, the opportunity that you and I have this morning. To take the best of what we have, to build up the church, to build up God's presence, not necessarily in bricks and mortar, but in prayer, love, and hospitality, and service, so that we may stand. So that we may stand as a part of God's presence here in Dunedin and across the globe. And granted, I know, like the Israelites, sometimes we've used our best in ways that we shouldn't have. That isn't stopping God. That is not ending God's call to us, God's claim to us. And I have to tell you, I don't know what your best necessarily is. It's different for as many people that are different in their room and different in this room. It may be material things that you own. It may be time that you have. It may be gifts that you possess. What are we giving? To build up, to build, to construct, to be an active, constructing, mobilizing, living, breathing church, the body of Christ that we are called to be. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.